I gotta say that you're pretty lucky with the weather. I live in Berlin, and when I moved there, the first person that told me I love spending summer in Berlin is my favorite week of the year. That's so. Obviously, as I said, I live in Berlin, and for the past 2 years, I've been building up a company, an investment vehicle / company builder in the food tech area space. And I just realized that I guess this is the clicker. And so what I'm going to speak today, it's a little background like on where do we stand in food, but especially what are 5 of the many areas to be tackled in the food tech space. So first of all, the objective of food tech. We're going to have 9.7 billion people in 2050. The problem, despite common sense, it's not how we're ever going to feed them, because as of today, we already can feed them. The problem is how we can feed them in a sustainable way and in a healthy way. Because this is a little bit of a background on where do we stand and where do we come from with food. So after the Second World War, there was this explosion in population and food. That's when the industry of big food got created. Before that, it was not really existing. And this industry focused essentially on 2 things. Optimizing products on margins. So if you take the famous Big Mac, that costs 77 cents to produce. And they retail it for whatever, $4. So everything is like really based on margins. And the second part of it, and it's a very important one, on addiction. So the billions and billions have been spent, of dollars have been spent in the past years to engineer food to make it addictive, to have the customer come back and crave for more. And there's not really a black magic behind it. The way they do it, it's very simple. Sugar, salt, and trans fats. When you put these elements into products, essentially they act like drugs. They secrete, like they help the hormones release like dopamine and so on, exactly like cocaine does or chocolate, for example, does. And this is, you can see like a clear curve. So this is refined sugar. That's for saying, for proving the point of before. The moment that big food started, there's been an insane increase on sugar consumption. That's for making the product addicting. And the problem is right now, consumer on average, whether in US or in Germany, they eat 4 times more sugar or 5 times more sugar than the recommended daily average, which essentially that is a kind of representation of what big food thinks about the consumers. And this obviously has a huge impact on problems of people regarding health, like 10% of US citizens have type 2 diabetes, 600 million people in the worldwide are obese, and multiple like death from heart attacks. That obviously has a huge cost also also monetary cost in terms of health spending. And obviously health is not the only thing that it gets impacted, but also the environment. Right now, for example, 70% of the ground fresh water is being used for agriculture. We essentially have built a system for growing food without really caring about the sustainability of it. It was just about scaling it, and now we're realizing, probably we should find a better way to do that. And so that essentially leads all this combination of things, a demand for healthier products, a demand for a more sustainable production. It leads for changes, and changes always leads to opportunity. That's the beauty of that part. And so I here like have outlined 5 of the areas. There are many more. One that I personally like a lot is personalized nutrition. So personalized nutrition, essentially, the ultimate goal is what is the perfect food tailored to your body. Our body is completely different from each other. Well, not completely, but it's different from each other. And especially there's an area, like we discovered the genome, now we kind of understand it. Biometric blood data, we get it. There's an area, though, that it's completely untapped at the moment, which is microbiome, and has a huge opportunity because essentially we have 10 times more bacteria in our gut than human cells. And we absolutely don't understand anything on how these bacteria, they decompose the food compounds. And the thing is, we're starting now to see some correlation between how this bacteria works, and mental health in the sense that they help the release of serotonin, which is the happy hormone. So essentially, once we understand how the microbiome works in combination with our genetic data, we will be able to have a very, very tailored nutrition for us, according to our own body. So this is an area that is there for disruption, and we're still at the very, very early days. There start to be certain, like also B2C model in US, where essentially you start from it's called nutrigenomics. So you start with a DNA test, and then a blood test, and then a microbiome test, and then they kind of deliver you the food that it's tailored for you. So this is one of the models. Another area, and it's not even an area, it's an industry, food waste. 33% of the food worldwide gets wasted. So it's about $1 trillion a year just trashed down the toilet. And that's obviously, it's not just a monetary loss, but it's also environmentally very unsustainable. And there are many, many ways on how to approach food waste. You can have B2B model, so essentially taking produce that has been wasted and, for example, farm insects that then get sold to animal feed industry. Or you can also have B2C models, like there is this company in US, it's called Misfit Juices or something like that. So what they do is they take the so-called ugly produce, so produce that it's like not, doesn't pass the aesthetical standards to be sold in supermarkets, and then they just squish it, make a juice, and they sell it for you. So there are many, many ways on how you can tackle food waste. In the infographic, it's a little bit small, but that's for saying that if you take, just to put in perspective, if you take the whole food waste volume in the world, globally, yearly, and you put it in standard 40 meters containers, it covers the whole area of New York, New Jersey, and Newark. So it's quite of a huge amount. Another area which is very interesting is alternative ingredient. The purpose of discovering alternative ingredients, it's a purely sustainable goal behind it. So for example, how can we make meat replacement? So how can we use alternative ingredients for making, for example, a burger? That's what Impossible Burger does. And essentially how it works is you take different compounds from different plants, you put it together, it sounds easy, it's very complicated, and then you can replicate the texture and the texture and the taste of, for example, a burger. Another area which is booming, particularly right now, I'm not the biggest fan of it, it's insects. So, and the reason behind insects is that there is a perception, or at least a demand from the consumer side of proteins. And proteins mostly comes from meat. Some of them comes also from plant, but these are not full proteins. So the point is that crickets or whatever, insects, they are way more sustainable in production. As you can see from the graph here, they consume less water, the turnover is faster. So they're essentially a more sustainable source of protein. And you start to see popping up startups doing cricket protein bars or cricket powder, all these insect-based products. So this is an area that is evolving quite fast. And essentially the goal here is how we can mostly replace animal-based products with more sustainable ingredients. Another example, for example, is Hampton Creek. So they did this eggless mayo. So it's a sort of vegan mayo. Connected to this topic, there's a new, let's say, area that is growing very strong, and it's the area of cellular agriculture. It sounds fancy, but I'll explain it, try to explain it quite simply. Essentially, the goal of this area is entirely to replace traditionally animal-based products like milk, eggs, gelatin with non-animal products, but having exactly the same ingredient. For example, milk, if you take milk, you can take almond milk, soy milk, and so on. You still call it milk, but it's not the milk of the cow. With cellular agriculture, you can make a milk that is exactly like the cow milk. And the way it works is, in case of the milk, for example, there's a main protein, it's called casein. So what you can do is you can extract the gene typical of casein from the milk. You can implant it in bacteria. Then by fermentation, for example, you grow these bacteria that are full of casein, and essentially then you take the casein produced in the bacteria, you add the water and all the other stuff for the milk, and then you have exactly the same milk. I'm not particularly a big fan of milk replacement with this method, but the interesting part of cellular agriculture is that I think GMO had a very, very bad connotation in the past due to the fact that it was completely unregulated. And when something is unregulated and is in the hand of private big corporates, they're obviously going to exploit it for their own benefit. So all of a sudden, I can come up with a crop that doesn't grow twice, so you have to buy my seeds, and probably that stuff gives me cancer. That's what we have an understanding in GMO as of today. What I think, though, it's important to reconsider is that GMO, as it can be used as a bad thing, can also be used as a very good thing. So for example, I can take a certain crop, and I can make this crop that has certain genes that decrease the cancer risk or heart attack risk. Because once you can play with the genes, you can play for good causes or bad causes. And that's cellular agriculture, de facto, is one of the branches of this GMO with the goal of replacing animal-based products without using essentially animals. The last one is future of farming. I mean, this is, again, it's an industry per se. It's called AgTech, and there are a gajillion models to make it work. The goal there as well, it's how to increase productivity, how to produce in a more sustainable way, so using less resources. And the models are very, very varied. I mean, you can have B2B software SaaS for running or optimizing the farm operation. You can have more hardware plays, so how to essentially connect in-field sensors so that you can have more data and analyze the stuff. You can have hardware plays to connect on the traditional trucks or like farming equipment for, I don't know, with image recognition and so on and so forth. So this is an area that is growing, as well as, for example, vertical farming. Vertical farming is essentially, it uses mostly the technology of hydroponic, which allows you to produce mostly green leaves in indoor spaces, thanks to specific gel that fits the plant and LED lights. So, for example, with Food Labs, we invested in technology company that produced these modules for vertical farming. And what we're going to do now, we started selling it to supermarkets, so that eventually you as a consumer, you enter the supermarket, you see this big rack that is kind of here, and then you pick the lettuce, and you just bought a lettuce that had 0 kilometers in terms of supply chain. We also made a restaurant where essentially you go there and you essentially eat what is being grown in the restaurant. Turns out that actually from a nutritional value perspective, it's much healthier, because the moment that you cut a specific vegetable, the nutritional value decay exponentially with time. So these are 5 areas that I just outlined, but there may way more. If you think about smart packaging, so connected packaging or Industry 4.0, food safety is going to be a big topic, especially in connection with new ingredients, cellular agriculture, so what could be the potential counter effect of that, and new food distribution model, so how the whole hospitality industry can be changed with food tech technology, which they're going to speak later. I think that's it. We're having probably an exploding watermelon now.